So since we are creating a program for events, let's just name it as Z demo underscore event and press create button. You can name anything starting from Z. System will pop you for title and the type of the program. Just write any title you like. I will enter demo events and I'll choose executable program and just save it in the local object because we don't want any request for now to be transported. Now you are there in the editor. Now in editor, as you can see, the first executable statement is report. The statements above report are just the comments as they start from star, so they'll not be executed. So with the report, now what I'm going to tell you is that every single program, whenever it runs, there are few implicit events that are raised. Like initialization is one event which will always be raised uh, in any program whenever it runs. But if you don't mention it in your program, that means you don't mention that you want to write anything, you want to do anything. So the initialization event would be raised implicitly, but nothing will happen for that event. So there are a couple of events that are already there in ABAP editor, and they always gets called on the sequence. I'll just give you the sequence of all the events. I would choose top 5 events. The first event is initialization, add selection screen output, add selection screen, then start of selection, and after that end of selection. So initialization is the first event that is called in any program. If you don't mention in your program the word initialization, then it would still be called, but nothing will happen. Or if you just let it be like this, you have mentioned initialization, but still you have not written, it would make no difference. But to see what actually happens and what sequence is being used and what events are called when, we'll just write a write statement so as to get an output. We know write statement do a print on the screen. So if I'm writing write initialization, it will give me an output as initialization on my output screen, on my output page. So I'm just writing a write statement after every event call that I have put in my program so as to get to know when and where a event is called. It's a very simple way. It is my way to understand what event is called when. So, and of course, one more thing that you should know is that these events are called in this sequence. No matter wherever you write this event, if you have written initialization at the end, then also initialization would be called at the first only. So you can write initialization anywhere in the program after selection screen output, start of selection, end of selection. But initialization would always be called implicitly as the first event, and wherever you have mentioned initialization, the code immediately after that would be called in the program. So having said that, I'm just writing it all over: start of selection and end of selection. They are itself implicitly telling you what they are used for. Initialization, of course, initialization. Start of selection, sorry, add selection screen output is of course for something to do with the selection screen. So let's see. So far we have not created any selection screen, so let's see if they will be called or not. I'm just saving it, activate it, activate, and there are no errors. Pretty good. Let's just run it. And here we get the output. 3 statements: initialization, start of selection, end of selection. We haven't get anything from the selection screen events. Not the selection screen output is raised, nor the selection screen is raised. And the reason is we don't have any selection screen for now. That means even if you have your events in your program, then also it will not be called until it is implicitly raised, until the condition which is the standard condition is there. Or even if you don't have but the condition is getting fulfilled, it will be raised. So it's like there are conditions that are set by SAP. So to get these 2 events also raised, let's just create a selection screen. We know that parameter statement creates the input field which uh, is a input field for the user, and since you are asking for a user, you are actually asking for selection, and that is called a selection screen by default. So parameter statements actually at the backend creates uh, you know uh, a selection screen. The screen number will always be 1000. So it's like now the selection screen is created, as you can see. P underscore first is our selection screen, and now if I run, what should I get? I still get only two write statements: start of selection, end of selection. Now I have my selection screen also, but I cannot see my initialization, my selection screen output, and add selection screen, all these three events. Does that mean that they are not called? No, they are actually called because we have initialization is a mandatory event. It would always be called, so it is being called. But why I cannot see the write statement is that write statement writes anything as an output, but right after that I have called a selection screen, so which overlaps that write statement. So that means that initialization is called, but it is not being shown because I have just written a write statement in initialization. To understand it more, I would just do some default thing in initialization. uh, let's just see if we can do. Let's go back. Now I would rather want to go to initialization, and I would not just want to write a write statement. This time I would like to do some sort of default. So let's just say p underscore first and default something. P underscore first equals to 1. So now if the initialization is being raised, the value of p underscore first would be 1. Let's just see if it is there or not. Yes, it is there. What does that mean is that basic function of initialization is not to write anything until you have the screen. If you don't have the screen, then you can of course use it for that as well. But the basic function of initialization is to do the initialization of the fields that you have on such selection screen. That means if you want to put anything for default, let's say you have a default value that you want to show on a selection screen. Just like I did, this p underscore first screen was there with me. I just wanted to have 1 as a default for the user. He can change it and then also do his own stuff. So basically initialization is always used to do initialization of all the fields that you have on the selection screen or any screen after that. So initialization is clear to us now. Let's just make another parameter, p underscore second, and we will let it be as a character thing. Character is by default, so I'll just write 100. So that means it's a character parameter of 100 width. Now I want to see why these two events are not called. Actually, the add selection screen output event is called, but since I have again written write statement, this is not being shown. So what I'll do is I will write this statement to p underscore second. I can also write p underscore second equals to add selection screen output, but since I've written already a write, this also means the same. Write add selection screen output to second means p underscore second equals to. So they are both the same thing. So I'm just now activating, and let's see. So p underscore second has a value add selection screen output. Do you see the difference? That means that selection screen output is an event which is called right before selection screen. It's something right before you have your selection screen. Now initialization is also before selection screen, add selection screen, output is also before selection screen. Then what is the difference between the two? So to understand the difference, it is about the usage. Initialization is to initialize the fields. Add selection screen output is to change the property of the fields. For instance, if I want to change the property to display, I want few fields to be editable and few fields to be in display mode. I can do that. How to do? You come into the add selection screen output event, just write this in your program, and there is an inbuilt structure called screen. This is always going to be there in any program, so you just have to loop it. Loop at screen is a loop that is put on internal structure, internal table that will always be there whenever you have a selection screen. So if I say loop on that structure, loop at screen, and screen input as nothing, and just modify screen. So ultimately, if you understand what I'm doing, it is that I'm saying that whatever value is there for any field, the property input of that field should be display. So the property input means that I don't want it to be input enable. If I want it to be input enable, I would say input equals to X. This is something that we will again understand moving forward, but let's just see that what is the output. This session is to explain you about the events, not to explain you about the loops. So now you can see that these two fields are in display mode, but I'm not using it because this is an irrelevant thing. I just wanted to show you why we use the selection screen output.